90% of female-led businesses don't even do six figures. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Zilat Lopez, retired therapist and business owner who's actually getting ready to exit her online business. And we're going to be spilling the tea on how you can not only grow your business beyond your wildest dreams, but the secret hidden tips that are going to help you to be able to sustainably build wealth over time and not get unmotivated in the process. So you'll want to stay until the end to catch all of the gems. And I look forward to sharing this amazing interview with you. We've got Zilat here going to share some serious gems with us about how she's built this business that most women never get a chance to experience and do. And now it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I'm sure everyone wants to build a business. They see the glamour, they see the freedom, they see, the travel and all that fun stuff, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And just the development of your own mindset and who you are becoming as a person, as a friend, to be able to watch has been amazing. And I'm so excited for everyone to get to watch us have this conversation, kind of be a fly on the wall and listen in on the challenges, but also the bright side, and that there is definitely, a mecca that you are working towards. So I am so excited to host you as my first guest here in person, and probably have to have you back to talk about different things because there's just so many tentacles and you are a wealth of knowledge. When we talk about wealth, I think about Z. So nobody is perfect. So we will talk about hurts and hangups and things like that. But I think diving right in to kind of tell your story backward in an interesting way is from what you've talked about recently. You're getting ready to exit your business that you started 3 years ago, a few years back.
4 years back, 2020 COVID.
2020, oh my gosh. So, it's really exciting to be able to see the evolution of a business that you started just a few years back and now are able to get to the next level with, have an exit, be successfully on to the next thing. Tell us maybe about what that's been like for you, kind of preparing for this process. I know it's a doozy.
Man, I don't think there will be anything harder than this right now in my business. Maybe I'm just saying that because I've been through so much, but right now, literally, I am in it. I am the kitchen, literally, we just left. We just left my place and I am calling Chase and I'm like, can y'all mail me the statements for those bank accounts I closed a while back? Right? Because the profit first, have an account for profit, have an account for taxes, and then have one for expenses. Yeah. Sometimes you plan and God laughs.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So you're preparing to be able to, have your business acquired, but I'm sure that comes with much more than you ever imagined up front. Yeah. Did you know that you wanted to exit the business when you started it, or was it something that came, about in the process?
No, it's so funny, Jacinth, that all these mentors and coaches that I've had throughout the years, they say these things and I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah. But I've just been doing, right? Ever since I was little, I've always raised of just do, not be. And then I'm realizing, start with the end in mind. That's a thing. But now I'm actually doing it in living color. And I'm like, whoa, this is what it takes. It's funny, but I signed up for something that's hardcore. Yeah. It's heavy. It's we can do hard things plus then some. Yeah.
So not what you had in mind originally.
No.
But you're in this process now. You realize with hindsight being 2020 that you had been doing, which I think in a lot of ways is a strength, right? Because
can be.
You might not be where you're at to some extent without having been doing things to get here. But it also sounds like maybe that's not the state that you always want to be in as a business owner.
You got that right. 100%. I'm learning the difference now between being because I am. Because here I am, right? Versus doing and hustling for that approval, hustling for that worthiness or anything else that I learned erroneously.
So I would love to know, because I don't even know if I've asked, right? We've been friends for a few years now. You're a retired therapist like me, right? I would love to know what made you start another business when you were a therapist. What was it that sparked you, helping other therapists learn how to grow their businesses? And we'll have you kind of introduce what the Viva system is if you like as well.
Yeah, it was one of those aha moments. We all have one of those. And I've read your book and I've read it again and then again. And I'm a fan, everybody, in case you don't know, right? With little highlights in here, right? And little notes. But I had that moment that you had We're all sitting there. Like, if you're a therapist, y'all already know this, right? This moment, you're sitting at the agency. You're writing your 30th note because you already are given way too many clients at your agency, and they paying you way less than they should. And I had this epiphany where I was like, well, hot dang, let me pull out my little pen right now. And I started adding up, and you know what I did? I did something you ain't supposed to do, and I'm gonna say it. You know how we write our notes, our progress notes? I went into the little reports, and I was like, well, geez, I could see how much I was billed. Not what I billed, what I was billed for. And it was 4 times as much that I was being paid. And I was like, whoa, hold up here. What if I took back my own power? What if I started showing therapists, mental health and wellness professionals, just healers in general, to do what I did? Because I bounced. The moment I got licensed, I remember this day like yesterday, back in December of 2017, I got licensed, and the very next week, even during Christmas, I was like, here I come, incorporation, and I'm going to start my little private practice. And in 3 months, I left. I created an exit plan. And the epiphany moment was, I am underpaid, overworked. I am sitting in my car in the middle of a city in California where I can't even walk to my car as a woman and feel safe. And I got to call my supervisor and be like, hey, I got in my car okay. What kind of job am I doing for this paycheck?
Yeah.
That was a moment.
So then having that aha moment and being able to say to yourself, there's something I can do about this. Because I think what happens for a lot of people is you have an aha moment and you bury your head in the sand, or you have an aha moment and you run the other direction, or you get discouraged. Or I think that's what happens for a lot of women. It sounds like for you, you had the aha moment and you said, well, I'm not a tree. I can move. I can do something about this. And that's why I think having you here today to talk about this is helpful, because for you, it's natural, your approach and how you've been doing things. And I think for a lot of people, it's not. They don't know, like, what is it I'm missing? What am I not doing? Or who am I not being that is going to help me make progress? And I think that's one of those things is you are saying what if with abundance in mind, as opposed to, oh man, this is the reality and I'm stuck.
I love that you said that. And, more so is like that olive branch. And here's what I've realized. Like, if somebody doesn't tell you, you don't know. It's so funny, but I've been listening to so many new things, right? And you're going to crack up. But I remember the first time somebody said to me, like, 50K, like, that's baseline for a month. And I looked around and I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, that's baseline, mama. That's baseline. And I was like, that's what I'm making a year at my agency. What? And then it was true.
You're like, they aren't lying.
They're not lying. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I remember meeting you in a clubhouse room, I think, or something like that, right? And, you were doing rooms where you were talking with your students. You were just talking about private practice and business. And I think as a clinician, I actually just did a CEU training for therapists on money mindset stuff. It's kind of taboo, I feel like, in the industry to talk about like making a lot of money and wanting to branch out outside of therapy and do coaching and therapy, in tandem and whatnot. And so I was so intrigued because I feel like we're like unicorns, right? Like me and you are unicorns in our field and whatnot. And it was like $50K a year to $50K a month. And I was like, I like this girl.
I'm going to go in there.
It doesn't mean that you're greedy because you want to make a lot of money. It doesn't mean that you can't help people and also take care of your own finances and be able to, live with decency. But there's just so much we don't learn and so much we're not exposed to that makes it challenging to be able to undo a lot of the conditioning and programming that we receive in grad school. So I would love to hear, as we're working backward, right? What were some of the most prevalent unproductive, unhelpful, like unhealthy mindsets or beliefs that you heard? I know for me in school, it was like, you didn't go into this industry to make money. Like, what are some of the money myths that you feel like you either heard in schooling or in your profession that made it
what?
hard?
I'm going to roll it back, right? Like remix and rewind. It's actually in childhood, because here's the funny thing. I went into grad school as a hair and makeup artist. So I was the one in the mix that wasn't a nurse, that wasn't a caseworker, that wasn't somebody already in the health industry. And I was already the odd woman out. And I was like, wait, what? Like, there's myths about this? I didn't know. But what I did know is that my dad told me you have to work really, really, really hard. And my mother taught me that I wasn't worthy unless I was like producing, unless I was like studying something and cooking at the same time and just being busy.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing a lot.
I took those mindsets. And then I started hearing things in grad school, and it would kind of catch my attention, but it didn't hit me until I saw it in practice at my agency. And here's what I mean. I remember having a couple of professors that were like, we have a big heart, everyone, and we just got to love. And I remember thinking to myself, well, love is love, but it don't put food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a saying in Spanish that says, like, when love goes out the window, like, you still got rent to pay. You still got rent to pay. So there was something inside me that was like, yes, you can be loving and you can be pouring into others in a healing way and also have financial growth. So for me, it wasn't so much that I heard it in school, but I think it was just a culmination of all of it since childhood for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I can't wait till we dig more into some of those unlocks you've had when it comes to like what you learned or what you're exposed to growing up and how that affected your money mindset as an adult. But I think, you know, what you're mentioning really makes me think about how significant it is to have some level of practice of personal development and growth, right? So like you said, if no one tells you, then you're most likely not going to know because it's not going to be on your radar. And so, excuse me, being able to have the reflections, whether it's in mentorship, whether it's in coaching, whether it's in, you know, having a partner or whatever the case may be, can be really significant. I would love to know if that's been something that's been helpful for you, is to have like accountability in any way, shape, and form.
Girl, check. In all of them. In every single one of them. Yeah.
Do you think it would be possible to kind of like get to where you are now if you didn't have like coaching and support and accountability and all of that?
That's such a great question. Do I think it's possible to get exactly where I'm at if I didn't have all those investments made of time, money, energy into those people that were like, this way, honey, not that way? No way. No way. I think I could have gotten here because this is my journey. This is my path already chosen, right? God's got me.
Right.
It just would have been a little different, I think. Yeah.
I think it might have taken longer too, right?
Yeah, that too.
Because it's like you'd be trying to figure it out yourself.
There's stops along the way.
Right. We'd hit some potholes or whatever. So one of the things, because I've interviewed like hundreds of women on the topic of creating financial freedom, right, is that when I ask like, what books have you read? Have you gotten support or coaching for this? So many women are not investing their time, energy, effort, and yes, their money to be able to get the fast pass, like when you're at Disneyland and you could just go to the front of the line, right? And I know that there's reasons why, because a lot of women are fearful of like being scammed or, you know, not knowing who to trust, wanting to make the right decision or the right choice. And I'm sure like me, you have made choices and investments that sometimes didn't go the way that you planned. You know what I mean? You have your experiences. And that you learn something from either side. So whether it works out the way you want, yes. If it doesn't, there's still a lesson there for you. But I think that there's this hesitation around jumping in or figuring out who you want to learn from, and it's just holding women back. And so I would love to hear for you. You've talked to thousands and thousands of, you know, women and other business owners as well. What do you see as like some of the biggest roadblocks to their success?
I think there's like 3 things that I just see constantly, right? Like for me, I've been closing on calls on high tickets for a while, and girl, let me tell you, like they're patterns. And it's so funny because I look at myself and I'm like, whoa, like I didn't even know that was like a thing, right? On the opposite end, yes, I heard limiting beliefs as a child, but then there was things that happened to me that I was like, whoa, that actually grew me. Like it's so funny, but my partner and I the other day were talking about like, hey, how'd you learn how to swim? And he was like, oh, I had swimming classes. And I was like, that's a thing? You had somebody to teach you. My daddy pushed me in the pool in the deep end and was like, no floaties, like let's learn. And it was the same thing, right? So my first high ticket coach that I invested 15, 20 grand into, like 20 grand total. I remember when he pitched me, I was just like, heck yeah. Like, yes, like I see that for myself. Absolutely, like hell yes. That was a whole body yes. And when I'm on these closing calls with these women, when I'm having these consultations, when I'm having these conversations, there's this something that happens inside them that's like, that can't be for me. That ain't for me. Like that right there, nope, that's for her, but that ain't for me. The belief in self that can be yours. Like number 1, the belief. Right? Like that is mine. Amen. It's already here. There's just like this time gap between it, right? Yeah. It's kind of like the second part to this, first and foremost, is trusting yourself. You know, something that I say very often, and a lot of people are like, dang, Z, like you cutthroat. Like that's very blunt. And I'm like, maybe, but it's very honest too. Let's cut to the chase. And it's either you don't trust me or you don't trust yourself in this process and showing up for yourself with the accountability and the understanding that you and foremost are responsible for your results. Right? That's so important. And then number 3, I would say, is just understanding that this isn't a instant act, add a little bit of coffee and you got some instant coffee. This is like the long haul. This is like an investment of time, money, and energy. And I know you know that.
Yeah.
Because we're both like literally texting like 4:30 a.m. or it's 11 at night. It's like, girl, have you figured out this SEO for this title card? Because we here on YouTube fucking killing it. Right? It's that investment of time. So those are the top 3 things that I've noticed that most individuals that seek professional development, that seek that like that freedom that you get with just creating. Like, I don't know about you, girl, but I know when you wake up, you're like, what would I like to create today? Yeah. And you have that freedom. Well, freedom is expensive, baby. And you got to pay with your trust in yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, bars.
Yes.
Freedom is expensive.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to pay with your investment in yourself. And you know what's interesting? Oh, so my brain is literally going so many different directions. This is amazing. So the first thing that comes up, the most recent thing is that people want others to pay them, right? So I'm a business owner and I want you to, patronize my business. I want people to invest in my business and make me a millionaire or whatever the case is. But how much have I invested in myself to kind of lead the way for them, right?
100%.
So that's the first thing, is that if you're a business owner and you're not investing in yourself, then why would you think anyone else would want to invest in themselves with your business?
Yep.
And that got really clear for me when I was a therapist, and we didn't learn about business in therapy school. Okay. We didn't learn anything, even though they know that we want to be in private practice most of the time. Right. But I digress. I didn't realize until I started a different business, right? My online coaching business, that I was like, wait, how much do people invest in themselves with my business as a therapist? I just knew like if I had a fee, it was like $100 a session or $200 a session. I was like, yeah, it's like $100. But like, how much is that annually? That as a business owner, I'm expecting or I'm pitching or I'm, selling someone to invest thousands of dollars in themselves annually with therapy.
The LTV.
Their LTV, right? We don't
LTV,
learn
baby.
about those things in school. So I was like, oh my gosh, as a therapist, my expectation is my clients showing up regularly and consistently to invest at least $2,000 to $5,000 annually in themselves. And I don't think clients even actually, because they don't add it up typically, right? Think or realize that they're doing that.
Well, unless the therapist be telling them, because I tell them like, listen, honey, here's what you're about to spend, because that purse and that vacation to Hawaii, what do you want right now? Literally, what's the priority here? I do. I straight up ask them when I was practicing.
You bring that up. I love that, because then it helps them to be able to
check themselves.
Exactly. Right. And so when you have these conversations and you're closing clients, I might have to have you come back just to talk about sales alone, because I would love to hear like everything that you could share on that. But for someone to have a vision, because they got on the phone with you, right? Like they have a dream, they have a vision, but then to get to the point where it's like, now it's time to jump, right? Like now we're asking someone to jump. Our job is not to push people off of the edge as coaches.
I'm going to jump with you. Come jump.
We're jumping together.
Yes.
Come jump. It's going to be fun, right?
Yeah.
And you might get a few scrapes and bruises around the way, but at the bottom there's a pool, and we're gonna.
Well, it's like pole dancing, right? Like I've been practicing that, and you get pole kisses, but it's like it hurts. There's bruises,
right? Yeah. And then eventually you'll become more graceful, and you'll be able to like look like it's effortless, right?
That's right.
And so I think that when you mention being on these calls with someone who wants freedom, they want to grow their business, they want to have flexibility to design their life, right? But then it gets time to jump. And then they hesitate, or they back up, or they run in the opposite direction, depending on who it is. And how, a person could be able to figure out how to get past that. That's for y'all. Okay. We can't do that part for you, but I think a lot of women say they want accountability, but they don't know what accountability actually like is. And so when they actually experience it, it's like, oh, this is a lot. I'm going to have to work. I'm going to have to do something about this. You know what I mean? For the women that you've been able to work with that have been successful, right? And been able to check the boxes of like hitting their goals, what do you think sets them apart? Like what makes them different that they're able to do that?
It's so funny. I actually just played this video for my team the other day. I don't know if you're familiar with Tracy McMillan,
Sounds familiar.
but she wrote the book Why You're Not Married Yet.
Okay.
So she has this amazing TED Talk. It's the person you should marry. Why am I even mentioning this? Because one, she thinks a lot like us, but what she's discovered is that you got to hold your own self accountable. So the whole point of her TED Talk is the person you should be marrying is you. And so apparently, if I go to you and you're my money coach, right? I'm, in my mind, hiring you to hold me accountable. But that's the erroneous thought. The money mindset, right? Like when you're literally doing this with your hands is I am holding myself accountable and I am doing this with my sister. I am doing this with somebody that's already doing that with themselves.
Yeah.
It's just like a relationship like any other, right? We ain't going in to be a part of a whole. We are already whole. We're just here being wholly together.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's a great segue because as you discussed and brought up money mindset, I'd love to hear some of the things that have been unlocked for you over time, right? So since we met in about 2020 or so, we've had plenty of conversations.
Yeah, text too.
Text conversations, all kinds of things. What have been some of like the biggest shifts that have had to happen for you, especially as a person who will talk about like your experience growing up, going from like maybe not coming from like an affluent background to having a profession and then making like loads of money? Like what have been some of the shifts you've had to make?
You know, it's so funny, but I texted you the other day, right? I was like rereading this baby here and I literally had like a tear come and I was like, dang, like what is hitting me? And then I felt it like deep down inside, like right here. And I was like, oh, I'm my mom. And everybody, like any woman is listening, she's like, I don't want to be my mama, but you become your mother. And then I was like, whoa, you know, it may not be food for me. It may not be explicit sexual content online, like porn. It might not be any of that for me, or alcohol or smoking, but it's shopping, crap. What else? Working. And then I had to piece it together and I was like, there's my parents. In every relationship you have, your parents will pop up unless it becomes conscious. And in that very moment, I was like, conscious, check. Overworking my father and shopping my mom. There it was in my relationship with money.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to see that, to become conscious of it?
It was so funny because I had like this duality. There was this half of me, right? And it was a duality that was doing a dance though. It wasn't like fighting against each other. Half of me was like, oh, like little Z, it's okay. You didn't know. And then, you know, I'm just crying and the mascara's running. And the other half of me was like, dang B, like it took you that long? It literally, it's kind of like the show of Tracy McMillan that she created, right? With Kerry Washington, where the little girl comes up and it's like, girl, where you been? Like you just showed up, just waiting for you.
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
So half of me was telling myself like, it's time. Congrats. Now you're here. Yay. You arrived.
Oh my goodness.
That's what it was. You arrived.
And I think a part of it is that if you're a person who is growing, even, you know, it may not necessarily be about being only a business owner, because I'm sure it happens for people in 9-to-5s as well, that when you go to another level, right, if life is like a video game, every level is going to have a challenge on it, and you are tasked with figuring it out. You pass, you go to the next level. You don't, you repeat the level. But as you ascend and let's say make more money, quote unquote, because we'll talk about how money is energy, which is another unlock that you had, right? That you're going to have to shed certain things. You're going to have to expand your perspective in certain ways. And then you're going to have to heal, because I know that one of the things that you're really, or that's really dear to you, is healing, right? And you are an advocate for everyone healing and getting to a place where they're able to end their life more healed than wounded.
That's
right?
Yeah.
That you have to allow yourself to enjoy going to the next levels, right? So being able to make more, have more time, freedom. You said working a lot. So at a point, you have to allow yourself to work less and not let working less correlate back to the belief that you're not going to make as much because you're working less, right?
Or I am less worthy.
Or that you're less worthy, right? Because it gets deep. The money, all of this stuff is surface level. It's all kind of like a cough when you go to the doctor and not the virus that's actually happening in the body. The money is a manifestation of other things.
That's right.
But how would you say you have been able to develop, right, over time, because it's a constant process of growth, your own money mindset? Like, what has helped you to be able to keep learning and growing in that process?
Well, I mean, a really big part of it was rereading your book until one day, it was so funny, right? Like we had this moment where you even had that like, yes. You're like, yes, that's what it is. Where I'm like, wow, just sent money's energy? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, money's energy. And you're like, uh-huh. Yeah, uh-huh. And I could literally hear your giggle in my head. And I was like, whoa, money is energy. Like I have understood energy for a long time. But it wasn't until recently where I was like, money meet energy, energy meet money. Like you're the same. Yeah.
Man, it's wild. It's a wild ride, because I
Yeah.
think what happens too is you can look at someone from the outside and make assumptions about them and where they're at and how they got there and all of that, right? But it's this constant development. So I think someone would look on the outside and say, oh, this person's making, $500,000 a year. This person's got $1 million business or whatever, and think that they have it all figured out. But I'm sure you don't have it all figured out, right? Like you're experiencing challenges in your own personal growth and in your professional growth as well.
Yeah.
How do you think, because you mentioned, the beliefs that come up from mom's money story and then the beliefs that come up from dad's money story, if you could dig into some more of like growing up, what did you see and hear when it came to money? Like, what was your exposure or lack thereof to the idea of money and what to do with it?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because it's so funny, right? Like, I think recently, I don't think I know, somebody recently asked me, like, Z, like, when did you become an entrepreneur? And I had the funniest little giggle inside me, and I was like, I think I was born one, right? I remember this so clearly. It came up recently. You remember those juice boxes that they didn't have the juice box in it yet, but you had to buy the juice box to put in, and you were the cool kid at school? So I grew up in a area where I was one of the only children that had a year-round tan, like all year long, not just in the summer. And so being one of the only Latinas in my school, like ish, right? Like a very low population, I didn't have the same of certain things, such as lunch. So for me, it was like a torta or a burrito that I would bring to school. Right? And I was like, oh, that's a ham sandwich. Cool. Let's trade. And in that being said, a lot of the kids at school would bring like Capri Suns. And I was like, wow, that's something. So I take my little Mexican little child self home and I'm like, Mom, in Spanish, right? I'm like, Mom, guess what? Like these kids have these things and they're called Capri Suns. And she's like, oh yeah. She's like, yeah, I'm familiar. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I thought in my head, like, I got this in the bag. Like my mom's got me. So we go to the store, right? And then I go and I'm like, Mom, like, yes, like here it is. And she's like, no. She's like, that ain't coming home. And I literally was baffled. I was baffled. I was like, why? Right? I had like a princess moment, but I think that's where my higher self was like, what you mean limitation? What limitation? Like, what is this? Right? Like, ¿qué es eso? So then literally my mom was like, no, honey, like we can't afford that. And I was like, whoa, that's a thing. And I was young, girl. I was probably like in kindergarten, first grade. That was a thing where it was literally so vivid. It was like the pathway in my brain was set.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because that pathway was set. But you know what happened? I found a little side road.
Okay.
And then I was like, okay, you know what, Mom? Like, we can't afford this. You said that. Why? I asked questions. I asked good questions, even when I was little. And she was like, well, because we can't, because this is the list. And here's what your daddy gave me. And here's what we're about to get. And I was like, okay, so what do I need? Like, what do we need to get this? And not these off-brand high C situations over here. Because this is not happening. My little sister might be okay, but not me, right? Like I was like this since I was little. And my mom was like, well, there's a $3 difference. And I was like, okay, let me come back, right? And see what we can do. So I went home, I negotiated, and I was like, Dad, I get $1 allowance every Sunday. In Spanish, we call it domingo, which is allowance. And I was like, what say you if you give me 3 weeks in advance, right? Like, what do we got to do here? And that was my entrepreneur spirit. And so when people tell me, well, I can't afford that, I'm like, blasphemy. It's how can I afford that? Always. Like that's been with me since day one. So anytime anything's ever been presented to me and it's like, well, not yet. For me, like when God says not yet, it's because you got something better for me, God, or it's because I got to figure this out and build what you're wanting me to build to get what it is that I need. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So good. If y'all haven't been taking notes, I don't know. You're going to have to stop it and rewind and watch it again or
Hold on,
something.
hit subscribe.
Right.
Hit
All of that.
subscribe.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
this has been fruitful up until this point, then drop a comment with, what is resonating, for you. I think what you said is huge, right? Not I can't afford. It's how can I afford? And that's just a silly shift as far as language goes, but then it helps you to be able to go into creative problem solving mode instead of being stuck at a dead end. And we figure out how to afford plenty of other things like AirPods and getting our hair done and going on vacation. But how is it that we can then use that same lens for things that aren't going to maybe give us an instant return, but are going to give us, lifelong return on the other side of it. And so I would just urge anyone watching to think about that too. Because like you said, right, you were negotiating early and I love that you can see that entrepreneurial spirit coming from like a young age. Even if you don't have an entrepreneurial spirit as a part of like who you are, like in your blood, right? It's something that can be trained because you didn't never get help from that point. You know what I mean? You've still invested in yourself to learn sales and to learn how to build a business. And right. And so I think that for those who are like, oh, well, that's not me. Because again, right, people disqualifying themselves. Oh, well, that's not me. Like, I don't have an entrepreneurial spirit. So then I'm not going to be able to fill in the blank. Nope. It's a skill. It can be trained. You can learn for free on things like YouTube and read a book or whatever the case is, and it'll take you however long it's going to take you. But if you want the fast pass, then you find yourself support, and we'll make sure everyone knows how to connect with you just in case they want to learn more about how you serve. But I think that it's really important to be able to revisit your history, right? Your money story and your money memories to say, okay, this is where the dots are connected and this is what's coming up for me as an adult. Does it still make sense? Because we upgrade everything else around us. We update our phones every so often. We update our clothing and our cars. But how often are we updating our mind and our being over time? And so I would love to hear, right, how you, coming from a modest upbringing, right? I would assume that there were times where maybe like not everyone was on your side or like seeing the vision that you had, right? Because it wasn't their vision. How did you handle kind of being the only one seeing what you saw for yourself?
Girl, you're talking about yesterday. We're not talking about like years ago. We're talking about yesterday because, my family is on a different song and dance. And that's okay. I'm going to struggle with it, to be honest with you. I very much struggle with it because I want them to join the party and be like, how can I afford it versus I can't afford it. That's just a small example, but it's been hard. I heard this a while back and I remember the moment it hit me and I want to share this with everyone. Perhaps this might be a gem for someone today. People say that the hardest part of grief is losing a loved one when they pass away. Like their body physically stops and then they go, right? Like our fathers, right? I think the hardest part is grieving somebody who's still living. That's the hardest part. And that's what I've had to do with my family. I am grieving the family that is still living.
As you continually turn into different versions of yourself.
Correct.
And maybe they continue to be who they are, which like you said, is it's okay, but it's just going to come with this experience of having to grieve and let go of what you would think the relationship with them would look like and whatnot. Correct. Oh, it's so tough. And you're not alone because I literally hear it all the time of feeling isolated on this journey, right? As you're growing and you're evolving, because maybe not everybody around you is doing the same thing. And then I think like it doesn't mean everyone has to be cut off, right? Like I don't think it means you just stop talking to whoever those people are. I think it just means you know what the bounds are in that relationship. We understand the boundaries in that relationship that protect everyone involved. So I may not talk about certain things with certain people because it's just not going to be a fruitful conversation. And so we talk about what we can talk about. And that's why we have other places, other communities, other friends and things like that we can speak freely about other things, right? Like I get to talk to you about stuff that I probably can't talk to certain people in my family about, right? And so I just think that means maybe it's being able to expand intentionally your community, your circle to include those who resonate with you and are on similar paths, right? And I always say like the saying, it's lonely at the top is only for those who go by themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's only going to be lonely at the top if you go alone. And so we are going to whatever the top is, right? Together. And my family, I'm still kind of, I'll be like, hey guys, just whenever you want to.
I'm over here like, girl,
whenever you want to come.
How's the hike? How is the hike? Yeah.
But it's I think important to be able to think about that too, just because I hear all the time like people saying they feel really lonely and isolated in what they see for their life, but no one else sees it. No one else gets it. And hopefully this is helpful, y'all, to hear that you're not by yourself. So what would you say, right, is for someone watching or listening going to be the most helpful thing for them if they feel like they've tried it all and they have been, pouring their time into figuring out how to make progress, not just in their business or work-wise, but also just in their life spiritually, because I think a lot of this has to do with self-worth and whatnot. To get past like a stuck place, feeling like you're stuck in mud or stuck in quicksand, what would you say maybe to younger you're in a previous season of your life where you were like, I don't know, maybe I need to give up?
Girl, I felt that. I felt like
Every
that this
day?
morning. Like it's
10 minutes before we
yes,
talked.
exactly. Today I woke up at 4:30 a.m. My partner's doing this like morning pages things, right? And I'm like, okay, I'll wake up at 4:30 with you. And some days I'm literally like feeling like, nah, we don't got to do this today. Like every day is a stuckness. And I think that's where it's at, because recently I heard this where it's like wherever you're stuck is where the juice is at.
Ooh.
Right? Like that's where the most amount of growth is at. And when I look at this stuckness, I'm like, okay, what's on the other side of stuckness? My higher self. Myself that has a baby, myself that's married, myself that has the luxury of time to do whatever the heck I want to do, like to recook pasta that I burnt for lunch. And I get to do it over and over again because I so please.
Yeah.
It's that last part. It's the I so please. That's what gets me up. And so even on some alarms, like not lately, but before, what I would do is I would intentionally do things throughout my entire day that just gently and kindly remind me. Like one of them was the alarm of like, Z, like you are impacting millions, billions of people and their babies that haven't even been born yet and their daughters that haven't even heard your message yet. That would get me up real quick because I'd look at my phone and I'm like, oof, okay, God, I heard you, right? Meditation in the morning daily because God talks to me. Some days I don't want to listen, but the message be coming.
Parent, right? Sometimes you don't want to listen to your parents. They be saying stuff, you're like, oh, fine.
Right, exactly. Or on my phone intentionally, how each category I have, instead of having work apps, I have them in one folder where it's like, I am impacting the world. Instead of just being like social media for like achievement or gossip, it's here's how I'm sharing my message.
Yes.
So it's intentionally knowing like, what am I working towards? And that's what moves me past stuck to, oh yeah, I can do hard things. I did that. And I forget because I've been doing that for so long. My muscle is there where I don't even notice where I'm like, oh, whoa, that was hard. I've been waking up early for so long, just that literally my body does it on its own now where I'm like, huh. It's like that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard for some people. And I think that if you don't start and you don't give yourself that chance, you're never going to know. It's literally that like starting from the bottom and now we're in awareness and we're experiencing this.
Oh my goodness. You just said so many juicy things. What came to mind was I get to be stuck. So I think about like being a spirit, having a human experience. I'm sure people have heard that. And a part of that is the ability to observe my spirit having this experience. So if I'm stuck, it's because there's a lesson in it. It's because I get to have this experience, not I have to, or it's something that's happening to me. It's happening for me, right? To be able to evolve and go to the next level. And this is all a part of the journey. And when we think about people that we admire and people that we want to emulate, people, who we want to somehow be like, their stories are typically tumultuous. Like they have conflict in their stories. They have lives that went like this.
Hero story.
Right. Yeah. And so, and we love that there are these dynamics in someone else's story, but we hate when we're experiencing the dynamics in our own. We hate being the one that's in the valley when we want to see ourselves at the peak. And it's oftentimes because we're comparing ourselves to someone else's peak while we're in the valley. But it's a weird little anecdotal story. We were at Springs Preserve earlier today. And the way that you get in, there's a ramp. So I have the stroller and then there's stairs, right? And so I was ahead of my kids my bonus kid who's 11 and my baby who's like 15 months, she's carrying him and he's heavy. Okay. So she's like sweating and stuff like that, carrying him, and they're behind, and I'm walking at a regular pace, and I didn't change my pace, but I took the ramp instead of the stairs. They took the stairs because they didn't have a stroller. And so I was ahead of them at first, but them taking the stairs put them ahead of me. So when you compare yourself in your life to someone else's journey, you don't know what that other side looks like. It looks like you are behind someone else in a specific season, but tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, they might be quote unquote behind you because you took the stairs in a different season. And it's not about ahead and behind as far as like better or worse. It's just like where someone's at in their journey. And so I love that you bring that up because it's so important to be able to know, like in your own mind for yourself, to be present, to take the time to listen, to do the hard thing of being intentional and planning your environment to trigger you to remember, right, what it is you're working on, who you are, so that you can keep showing up, you know, the way that you want to in the most aligned vision of yourself. And so I love that because it sounds like you prepare your environment. You prepare your phone that when you log on, it tells you, it reminds you. You prepare, you know, by having accountability and getting up with your partner and things like that. So, so key. Oh my goodness. So I would love to have you share, like, how do you want people to connect with you in this season? And what does that look like for them to find you in the interwebs to stay in your world?
Yeah, I'm so excited, Jacent. So I'm wrapping up my book. So I'm going to join you, right, on this, like, here's what I got. So they can find me at zealot.com, which is my first name, right? And then Zealot on social medias.
Yes.
Yeah, I got lucky like that. So my first name is everything. You can find me online, my handle and my website.
Okay, so we might have to have you come back when the book is available. So that way we can talk about it. And I'm sure I haven't read it, but I'm sure it is packed with bars like the ones that you are dropping today. And I just appreciate you for your friendship. I appreciate you for the way that you show up in the world, because it really does serve as not maybe your intention, but, you know, inspiration and motivation. That's like, okay, I see Z, you know, taking good care of herself. I remember it was your birthday and you're like, I'm unplugging. And I'm like, I need to take good care of myself.
We're birthday twins almost.
Yeah, we're so close. And so just you showing up in the world the way that you do, just let that know that it doesn't go unnoticed and that people are watching. And if no one else can tell you or has told you today, thank you for that. And I'm excited to see how things continue to evolve because literally it's just the beginning. So like, I don't know. It's going to be really, really cool to see.
I'm trying to get like you just said. I'm trying to have a baby. I'm trying to get...
Listen, you know what's really interesting? Because as we wrap up here, just one last anecdotal thing. When I was pregnant and about to give birth, I was seeing a lot of people, like, you know, as far as professional colleagues, like I was saying, that feeling of back and forth and ahead and not. I'm seeing them and I'm seeing everyone else like, pew, pew, they're being catapulted, quote unquote, right? Forward or whatever in their journeys. And I'm like, round. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know that, you know, I probably have something that other people want or are looking for or whatever. And then we're going to switch places. So eventually, right, whenever the time comes, you're going to be pregnant and getting ready to pop a kid out. And then I'm going to be doing whatever catapulting in my business. Yeah. And it's about all of us being able to just ebb and flow together because I'll be able to share things with you that hopefully are helpful for where you're at in your journey at that time. And you always share things with me that are helpful for me in my journey. And so I think that, again, it's really about surrounding yourself with people that you can allow yourself to be where you're at and okay with, but also be able to learn from because you keep me running. You know what I mean? You don't want to be the fastest person in the room. I like being the slowest person because then I'm like, oh, how do I keep up? You know? So I appreciate you for helping me stretch. I'm excited to see how things evolve. And, you know, as we both go into different seasons in our lives, it's just going to be really fun. For anyone who's been watching, thanks for being here, being a fly on the wall in our conversation. And hopefully we get to have many more.